The letter arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a cable bill and a pizza coupon. No return address, just my name in careful block letters. I almost tossed it with the junk mail, but something about its weight made me pause. My name is Mara, and until that moment, I thought I had the kind of life people envied. Kind where you post perfect family photos on social media and actually mean the happy captions. I stood in my sunny kitchen, where my daughter Ivy's artwork plastered the fridge and the morning's breakfast dishes still waited in the sink. The envelope felt heavy in my hands, like it knew it was about to change everything. Inside was a single sheet of paper and 3 photographs. The first line read, "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but your husband is having an affair." My hands started shaking so badly I had to set the letter down on the counter. The photos spilled out, Caleb, my husband of 8 years, with a woman I'd never seen before. They were leaving what looked like a hotel, his hand on the small of her back. In another, they were kissing outside a restaurant I recognized downtown. The third showed them sharing a booth at our favorite date night spot, their fingers intertwined across the table. Timestamp on the photos was from last week, when Caleb said he was working late on a big client project. I must have read the letter 10 times, trying to make the words say something different. The anonymous writer claimed to be a concerned friend who'd witnessed their relationship developing over the past 6 months. 6 months. While I'd been teaching 3rd graders and driving Ivy to ballet, my husband had been building a whole separate life. My phone buzzed, making me jump. A text from Caleb. "Running late tonight? Don't wait up." I typed and deleted responses until my fingers hurt. Finally, I just wrote, "We need to talk when you get home." The hours crawled by. I picked up Ivy from my mom's house, helped her with homework, made dinner, and tucked her in, all while feeling like I was moving underwater. Every time I looked at her sweet face, so much like her father's, my chest ached. It was almost midnight when I heard Caleb's key in the lock. He tried to sneak in quietly, probably expecting me to be asleep. Instead, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the letter and photos laid out in front of me. "Hey," he said, freezing in the doorway. "What are you still doing up?" I pushed the photos across the table. "Who is she?" Color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then slumped into the chair across from me. "Mara, I can explain." 6 months, Caleb? 6 months of lying to my face. "It's not what you think," he started, but I cut him off. "Really? Because I think you've been sleeping with another woman while I've been here, building a life with you, thinking we were happy." His eyes darted to the stairs, checking if Ivy might hear us. "Keep your voice down." That's what broke me. Him trying to manage how I expressed my own devastation. "You don't get to tell me how to react to this," I said, my voice sharp and quiet. "Who sent these?" "I don't know," he said, running his hands through his hair. "Look, her name is Sienna." Started as just, "I don't know. But I want to fix this." "We can fix this." I stared at him, this man I thought I knew better than anyone. "Fix what? The lying? The cheating? Or just the fact that you got caught?" He reached for my hand across the table. I pulled back like his touch might burn me. "I'll end it," he said. "I'll do whatever it takes. We have Ivy to think about." The mention of our daughter felt like a punch to the gut. "Don't you dare use her as a shield," I whispered. "Not after what you've done." I stood up, gathering the photos and letter. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow, you can explain to our daughter why Daddy won't be living here anymore." As I walked away, he called after me, "Mara, please. I love you." I paused in the doorway, not turning around. "No," I said quietly. "I don't think you do." I didn't expect my mother to side with Caleb. That's what hurt the most, sitting in her pristine living room the next morning, watching her stir her tea with precise movements while telling me to think this through carefully. "Marriage takes work, Mara," she said, as if I'd complained about him leaving dishes in the sink. "Your father and I have been through rough patches too." "Did Dad sleep with his coworker for 6 months?" I asked, my voice sharper than I'd intended. Did he take her to your anniversary dinner spot? My mother's spoon clinked against her cup. Don't be dramatic. Think about Ivy. Think about your position in the community. The Hargroves are important people and divorce is so messy. Of course she'd worry about appearances. Clara Eldridge, queen of the country club set, couldn't have her daughter causing a scandal. I stood up, my coffee untouched. I need to pick up Ivy from school, I said, though it was only 10 in the morning. Sit down, my mother said firmly. Your father and I have discussed this, and we think you should consider marriage counseling before making any rash decisions. You discussed my marriage with Dad? The betrayal stung fresh. When? Caleb called us this morning. He's devastated, sweetheart. He made a mistake, but he wants to make it right. My hands started shaking. He called you before I could? He's trying to save your marriage, she said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. He knows he messed up, but... My phone buzzed. A text from Tess. Why is your husband having lunch with some blonde at Cafe Luna? Want me to key his car? I showed my mother the text. Still think he's devastated? Her face tightened. Perhaps there's more to the situation than... Stop. I grabbed my purse. Just stop defending him. He's not the person you think he is. As I reached the door, she called after me. What about the fundraising gala next week? The school board is expecting both of you. Turned back incredulous. My marriage is falling apart and you're worried about a gala? Your father chairs that board, Mara. It would look terrible if... If what? If people found out your perfect family isn't so perfect? The drive to Cafe Luna took 7 minutes. I spotted them through the window, Caleb and Sienna, heads bent close together over coffee cups. She was younger than I'd expected, prettier. The kind of woman who made men feel important. I walked in before I could talk myself out of it. The bell above the door announced my arrival and Caleb's head snapped up. Color drained from his face. Mara, he started, standing quickly. This isn't, we're just discussing. Discussing what? I asked quietly. How to fix our marriage. Sienna stayed seated, her manicured fingers wrapped around her cup. You must be the wife, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Caleb's told me so much about you. Funny, he's never mentioned you. I turned to Caleb. Does your mother know about her? Since you're so concerned about family these days. Let's talk about this somewhere private, he said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. No need. I just came to tell you I've made an appointment with a divorce lawyer for Thursday. You can have your mother call them directly, since that's apparently how we're handling things now. Mara, please, he said, but I was already walking away. Outside, my phone buzzed again. My mother, don't do anything hasty. Come back and we'll discuss this properly. I turned off my phone and drove to the elementary school where I taught. My classroom was empty during lunch break, the walls covered in my students' artwork. I sat at my desk, surrounded by the cheerful chaos of third-grade creations, and finally let myself cry. A soft knock made me wipe my eyes quickly. Vivian Hargrove stood in the doorway, her face lined with concern. I think, she said quietly, we need to talk about my son. Vivian set a folder on my kitchen table 3 days after showing up at my classroom. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, spreading out bank statements and credit card bills I'd never seen before. I found these in Caleb's office while he was at work, she said quietly. I thought you should know what you're dealing with. The numbers swam before my eyes. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Credit card charges at hotels, restaurants, jewelry stores. And most damning, regular payments to Blake Consulting Services going back 8 months. Sienna Blake, I whispered. He's been funding her business? Vivian nodded, her face tight with disappointment. Nearly $200,000 as far as I can tell. That's why I've been getting excuses about why he can't help with your father-in-law's medical bills. My stomach lurched. We'd been struggling to cover Henry's cancer treatments, while Caleb was bankrolling his girlfriend's startup. Does he think I'm stupid? I asked more to myself than Vivian. All those times he said we couldn't afford Ivy's dance classes. My phone buzzed. Caleb, we need to talk about the house. I'm coming over. He's on his way here, I said, gathering the papers with shaking hands. You should go. Vivian stood but hesitated. Mara, be careful. When men like Caleb feel cornered. The front door opened before she could finish. Caleb stopped short, seeing his mother in our kitchen. Mom, what are you doing here? Leaving, she said coldly, squeezing my hand as she passed him. Caleb watched her go, then turned to me. What was that about? I slid the bank statements across the table. Want to explain Blake Consulting Services? Color drained from his face. You've been going through my private accounts? Private? We're married. Or did you forget that while spending our savings on your girlfriend? It's not what you think, he started, but I cut him off. $200,000, Caleb. While your father needs cancer treatments. While I'm working summer school to afford Ivy's activities. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I used to find endearing. Sienna's business is a solid investment. Once it takes off, investment. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my ears. Is that what you call stealing from your family? I didn't steal anything. That money was what? Yours? 'Cause last I checked, we both contributed to those accounts. For our future. For Ivy's future. He slumped into a chair. I'll pay it back. Sienna's company is about to land a major contract. Stop. I pressed my palms flat against the table to keep them from shaking. Just stop lying. For once in your life, tell the truth. Something shifted in his expression. The truth? Fine. Truth is I was suffocating here, playing the perfect husband in your perfect little world. Sienna sees me for who I really am. And who is that? A thief? A liar? Someone who wants more than PDA meetings and dance recitals. He slammed his hand on the table, making me flinch. Someone who deserves. Deserves what? I asked quietly. To destroy your family? To steal from your dying father? Heavy footsteps on the stairs made us both freeze. Ivy stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Why are you fighting? She asked in a small voice. Caleb's face softened. Princess, we're just. Go back upstairs, sweetie, I said firmly. Daddy's leaving. No, I'm not, Caleb said, standing. This is my house too. I pulled out my phone. Leave now or I call the police and show them these bank statements. Your choice. He stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed his keys. This isn't over, he said quietly. You're right, I replied, watching him walk toward the door. It's just beginning. After he left, I sank into a chair, my hands finally allowing themselves to shake. My phone lit up with a text from Vivian. I've made an appointment with my lawyer tomorrow. It's time to protect what's yours. I looked at the scattered papers on the table, each one a record of betrayal, and felt something harden inside me. Caleb wanted to play games? Fine. But he was about to learn I wasn't the same woman who'd married him 8 years ago. And I played to win. The divorce papers sat unsigned on my lawyer's desk while Ivy sobbed in the waiting room. Caleb had brought her, a calculated move I should have seen coming. She'd been begging to go home with him for the past hour. Maybe we should reschedule, my lawyer suggested, glancing at the closed door. I pressed my fingers to my temples. He's using her. He knows exactly what he's doing. Mommy! Ivy's cry pierced through the wall. Please, I want to go with Daddy. My hand shook as I reached for the pen. Caleb's voice drifted through, soft and comforting, playing the perfect father. This realized. He's part owner. My lawyer leaned forward. That changes things significantly. If he used marital assets to purchase ownership. Another cry from Ivy cut through my thoughts. I stood up, my decision crystallizing. I'll be right back. In the waiting room, Caleb sat with Ivy in his lap, stroking her hair. Perfect picture of fatherly devotion. He looked up, his expression carefully concerned. She's upset, he said softly. Maybe we should talk about shared custody. When were you going to tell me about your partnership with Sienna? His hand stilled in Ivy's hair. What? Your company announcement. From 3 months ago. The one where you're celebrating with your new business partner. Honey, he said to Ivy, setting her down. Go get a snack from the vending machine. Once she was gone, his facade cracked. You're having me followed? Don't flatter yourself. It's called Google. I crossed my arms. So that's where the money went. Not just an investment, you bought yourself a new life. It's not like that. The opportunity came up. Save it. You can explain it to the forensic accountant. His eyes narrowed. You wouldn't. Try me. Think about what you're doing, he said, lowering his voice. If you push this, it gets ugly. For everyone. Including Ivy. The threat hung in the air between us. I thought about our daughter, already struggling with the separation. About the scandal my mother feared so much. About everything I could lose. Then I thought about everything I'd already lost. No, I said quietly. You don't get to threaten me anymore. I walked back into the lawyer's office and picked up the pen. But instead of signing the original agreement, I wrote a new set of demands. Full custody, forensic audit, and no contact until the financial investigation was complete. When I emerged, Caleb was gone. Ivy sat alone by the vending machine, clutching an unopened candy bar. Where's Daddy? She asked. He had to go to work, sweetie. Ich knelt beside her. How about we get ice cream instead? She looked at the door, then back at me. Is Daddy bad now? My heart cracked. No, honey. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Big mistakes that hurt people they love. But that doesn't make them bad. Like when I broke your necklace and didn't tell you? I pulled her close, breathing in her sweet shampoo smell. Something like that. But bigger. Will he fix it? Like I fixed your necklace? I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. I don't know, baby. But I promise you we're going to be okay. My phone buzzed, a text from Vivian. Caleb just cleared out his father's medical fund. All of it. I'm so sorry. I held Ivy tighter, feeling her small arms wrap around my neck. Sometimes the hardest part of protecting someone is knowing when to stop trying to save everyone else. The first time I saw Elliot Jennings, he was arguing with the school secretary about paint colors. I'd stayed late to grade papers, and his voice carried down the empty hallway, calm but firm, insisting that beige wasn't an acceptable choice for the new library walls. Children need color, he said. They need life. I hadn't meant to stop and listen, but something in his voice made me pause. Maybe it was the passion about something as simple as paint colors, or maybe it was just that I hadn't heard a man speak without manipulation in months. Miss Eldridge. The secretary spotted me. You're on the renovation committee. What do you think about the library colors? I found myself drawn into a conversation about warm versus cool tones with a stranger whose eyes crinkled when he smiled. He introduced himself as the project architect, a widower with a daughter in kindergarten. Nora, he said. She's in Miss Chen's class. Oh, the quiet one who draws horses, I replied, remembering the shy girl who always sat alone at recess. His face lit up. You know her work? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer, emergency. Caleb's filing for emergency custody. Claims you're unstable. Call ASAP. The phone slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, clattering on the floor. Elliot picked it up, accidentally glimpsing the message before handing it back. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. I wasn't. I really wasn't. "I need to go," I managed, but my legs wouldn't move. "Sit," he said gently, pulling up a chair. "Just breathe for a minute." The secretary had disappeared, leaving us alone in the office. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stop the room from spinning. "He's trying to take my daughter," I whispered, more to myself than to Elliot. "The quiet one who draws cats," he said, making me look up in confusion. "That's my Nora. Not horses. I wanted you to know you're not the only parent here trying to hold it together." Something about his simple honesty broke through my panic. "How do you do it?" "Being a single parent?" "Badly most days," he admitted. "But we survive. Sometimes that's enough." My phone buzzed again, Tess this time. "Don't panic. I've got dirt on Caleb that'll shut this down. Meet me at Joe's in 20. I stood up, steadier now. "Thank you. For the paint colors and everything else." "Anytime," he said, then added, "For what it's worth, I think forest green would be perfect for the library. Deep but full of life." At Joe's diner, Tess was waiting with a manila envelope and a grim expression. "You're not going to like this," she said, sliding it across the table. Inside were photos of Caleb and Sienna at a jewelry store, examining engagement rings. Timestamp was from yesterday. "There's more," Tess said quietly. "The company they started? It's failing. They've been taking out massive loans, using your house as collateral. My house, the one I'd bought before we were married, that he'd insisted we refinance together last year. He's going to lose everything," Tess continued. "The custody filing? It's a leverage play. He needs your assets to keep his new life afloat." I stared at the photos, at Caleb's smile as he pointed to different rings. The same smile he'd had when he proposed to me when we bought our house when Ivy was born. My phone lit up with a text from Elliot. "Library committee meeting tomorrow. I could use an ally in the war against beige." Something shifted inside me like a key turning in a lock. I looked at Tess. "I need you to help me do something," I said. "Something that might be terrible but necessary." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Whatever you need." "I need to destroy him," I said quietly. "Not for revenge. For survival." Tess nodded, understanding darkening her eyes. "Where do we start?" I pulled out my phone, typing a response to Elliot. "Count me in." Some battles are worth fighting. And some, I was learning, were worth winning at any cost. The forensic accountant's report landed on my kitchen table the same morning Ivy announced she wanted to live with her father. 2 bombs, minutes apart, leaving nothing but silence and debris. "He said I can have a puppy," Ivy said, pushing her cereal around the bowl. "And Sienna makes really good pancakes." I stared at the report summary page. Systematic fraud, embezzlement, forged signatures. The numbers blurred as Ivy continued talking about her weekend at Caleb's new house. "And they're getting married next month. Sienna wants me to be the flower girl." The spoon clattered from my hand. "What?" "Don't be mad," Ivy pleaded. "Daddy said you'd be mad, but..." "When did he tell you this?" "Yesterday. After he picked me up from school." My head snapped up. "He what?" "He said you knew." Ivy's voice got smaller. "Did you not know?" I grabbed my phone, dialing the school. Yes, Caleb had picked her up. Yes, he'd shown proper documentation, the emergency custody filing I'd been fighting. The one my lawyer assured me wouldn't hold up. The one that apparently already had. My hand shook as I called my lawyer. Straight to voicemail. Then Tess. No answer. Finally, Vivian. "I just heard," she said before I could speak. "He's filed for full custody, Mara. He's claiming you're emotionally unstable and financially irresponsible." I looked at the forensic report again. But the proof is inadmissible. The records were obtained without proper authorization. All those careful plans, all that evidence, worthless. Because I'd tried to play by rules while Caleb rewrote them. Mommy. Ivy's voice wavered. Are you crying? I touched my cheek, surprised to find it wet. No, baby. Just tired. My phone buzzed. Elliot, heard about court filing. Need anything? Before I could respond, another text came through. From Sienna, let's talk. For Ivy's sake. Can I go to my room? Ivy asked. Daddy said I should pack some stuff. Something inside me cracked. No, honey. You're not going anywhere. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Caleb had planned this perfectly. The custody filing, the wedding announcement, using our daughter as both shield and weapon. I texted Sienna back. Where? She suggested the cafe where I'd first confronted them. Course she did. I need to run an errand, I told Ivy. Want to visit Grandma Clara? My mother answered the door with that look, the one that said she'd already heard. Really, Mara? Making that poor child choose sides? Not now, I said, pushing past her. Just watch her for an hour. Sienna was already waiting, an engagement ring glittering on her finger. My ring. The one Caleb had given me 8 years ago. Before you say anything, she started. This isn't what you think. Really? Because I think you're wearing my life like a costume. She twisted the ring. Caleb's changed. The business problems, they've made him realize that he needs my assets to stay afloat. I slid the forensic report across the table. Or that marrying you before the fraud charges hit will make it harder to trace. Her face paled slightly. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're not the first young, ambitious woman he's convinced to trust him. Just the latest. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, showing her an old news article about another failed business. Another female partner left holding the bag. He'll do it again, I said quietly. And when he does, you won't have my daughter as leverage. She stared at the article, then at me. Why are you showing me this? Because you're not my enemy, I replied, standing. You're just the next me. Walking out, I texted Elliot. Actually, yes. I need help burning everything down. His response came immediately. Library committee meets in 10. We can start with beige. I smiled for the first time that day. Sometimes the only way forward is through the flames. Sienna called me at midnight, her voice shaking. He's gone. With everything. I sat up in bed, already reaching for my shoes. What do you mean, everything? The company accounts, the wedding fund, my savings. She choked back a sob. He even took my grandmother's jewelry. Said he was having it cleaned for the wedding. A bitter laugh escaped me. Let me guess, right after you added him to your accounts? How did you know? Because that's what he does. I grabbed my keys. Where are you? At the house. Your old house. He gave me the keys last week, said we'd move in after. She stopped. There's something else. Something worse. I was already in my car. What? He took Ivy. The world tilted sideways. What do you mean, he took Ivy? She's at his apartment. No, Sienna whispered. He picked her up hours ago, said they were going on a surprise trip. I thought he'd told you. I hung up, dialing Vivian's number with trembling fingers. She answered on the first ring. I just got a call from Henry's care facility, she said before I could speak. Caleb cleared out his medical fund. All of it. They're threatening to discharge him. He has Ivy. Silence. Then, I'm calling the police. No, I said sharply. He'll disappear completely if we do that. I know where he's going. The lake house. Where we'd spent our honeymoon, where he'd always talked about retiring. Where he kept his emergency cash and spare passport. Called Elliot next. I need your help. But it's dangerous. I'll meet you there, he said without hesitation. Text me the address. The lake house was dark when I arrived, but Caleb's car sat in the driveway. Elliot pulled up minutes later, killing his headlights. Stay here, I told him. If anything happens, he grabbed my hand. Nothing's going to happen. But I called Tess anyway. She's bringing the police in 15 minutes. Inside, I found them in the master bedroom. Ivy asleep on the bed, Caleb sitting beside her with a packed suitcase at his feet. I wondered who would figure it out first, he said quietly. You or Sienna? Why? My voice cracked. Why take everything from everyone who loved you? Because it was never enough. He stood, moving between me and Ivy. Their love, your love, it all came with expectations. Be successful, be stable, be perfect. So you decided to be a thief instead? I decided to be free. He reached for Ivy. And she deserves that too. Freedom from all these expectations. Don't touch her. I stepped forward. You want to run? Fine. But you leave her out of this. She's my daughter too. No, I said quietly. She's your shield. Just like I was. Just like Sienna. Just like every person you've used to hide from your own failures. His face twisted. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I pulled out my phone, showing him the screen. And so does the SEC. Tess works for them now, did you know that? Has for years. She's been building a case since the first time you forged my signature. Color drained from his face. You're lying. Check your accounts. The ones you thought were secret. They're already frozen. He lunged for his suitcase, but I was faster. Spilled open, spilling cash and jewelry across the floor. Ivy stirred. Mommy? Daddy? It's okay, baby, I said, not taking my eyes off Caleb. We're just talking. About my surprise trip? Caleb's shoulders slumped. Side, I heard car doors closing. No trip tonight, sweetheart, I said. But I promise tomorrow we'll do something special. Just us. And Daddy? I watched as red and blue lights began flashing through the windows. Daddy has his own trip to take. Caleb didn't resist when the officers entered. He just looked at me, finally seeing me clearly for the first time in years. I did love you, he said softly. In my way. I know, I replied. That's what made it so easy to destroy you. I gathered Ivy in my arms as they led him away, her sleepy questions mixing with the sound of sirens. Side, Elliot waited with Nora in the car, ready to take us home. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about surviving them. 1 year later, I found myself back in the school library, now painted in deep forest green. Ivy and Nora sat cross-legged in the reading nook, sharing a book about horses or maybe cats. It didn't matter anymore. The SEC finished their investigation, Tess said, joining me at the window. Caleb's looking at 8 to 10 years. I watched our daughters laughing together. Did they recover any of the money? Some. Enough to restore Henry's medical fund, at least. She hesitated. Sienna's been cooperating. She wants to make amends. Good for her. I meant it. Revenge had lost its taste months ago, replaced by something quieter. Something like peace. Elliot appeared in the doorway, paint swatches in hand. Ready for the cafeteria renovation? No more beige, I warned, making him smile. Never again. The wedding ring on my finger caught the afternoon light, different from my first, simpler but somehow more solid. Like the man who gave it to me. Mom, Ivy called from the reading nook. Can I show Nora the letter? My heart stuttered. The letter had arrived last week, Caleb's first communication since his sentencing. I'd let Ivy read it alone, watching her face as she absorbed her father's words. If you wanna, honey. The girls bent their heads together over the paper. I couldn't hear what they were whispering, but I saw Nora squeeze Ivy's hand. "You okay?" Elliot asked quietly. "Getting there." I leaned into him. He asked to see her. "What are you going to do?" "Let her decide. When she's ready." My mother hadn't understood that choice. "He's still her father," she'd argued. But she hadn't seen Ivy's face that night at the lake house, or the weeks of nightmares that followed. Some wounds need time before you can even think about healing. "Miss Eldridge," a small voice interrupted my thoughts. One of my students stood clutching a familiar-looking envelope. This was in the library drop box. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a check, a large one, and a note in Sienna's handwriting, for Ivy's college fund. "I'm sorry. Karma's funny sometimes," Tess mused, reading over my shoulder. "Not karma," I corrected. "Choice. We all made choices." Vivian visited sometimes, bringing photos and stories from Caleb's childhood. Not to excuse, but to understand. To help Ivy understand. She'd chosen family over loyalty to her son's actions. Even my mother had chosen, finally, to see beyond appearances. She'd been the one to suggest therapy for Ivy to help her process everything. "Mom," Ivy appeared at my side. "Can we get ice cream?" Nora's never had the Superman flavor. "Never!" I gasped in mock horror. "Elliot, what kind of father are you?" He raised his hands in surrender. "I plead guilty to boring ice cream choices." "Then we better fix that." I gathered my things, watching our daughters race ahead, already planning their orders. "You know," Tess said thoughtfully, "revenge stories usually end with someone destroyed. But this isn't about destruction anymore," I finished. "It's about reconstruction." Sighed, Ivy and Nora waited by the car, giggling about something only they understood. Elliot's hand found mine, steady and warm. "Ready?" he asked. I thought about the letter in Ivy's backpack, the check in my purse, the paint swatches for next week's renovation. About all the ways life moves forward, even when you think it's stuck in the past. "Almost," I said, pulling out my phone. I had one last text to send to Sienna. "Thank you for choosing differently." Then I put the phone away and joined my family. Some stories don't end with a bang or even a whimper. They end with Superman ice cream and green library walls and the quiet understanding that healing isn't a destination but a journey. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you find people to share that journey with you.